You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hey everybody, welcome to Faith in Sport. I am Dr. John Acquaviva. I teach exercise science most of the days during the week. In fact, every day during the week at Wingate University. But I am here to bring you Faith in Sport, where we apply our faith to all aspects of sport. So whether you are a referee, an athlete, a parent of an athlete, a grandparent of an athlete, you're an administrator, you're involved in sport in any way, this is the show for you. Welcome, folks, at Radio Maria. Ed Billick's going to join us here in a minute. We're also going to do weekend headlines. We're going to do the quick Q&A with Dr. A. I have a great question from a listener coming up. And then we're going to do upcoming guests. So I'm going to let you guys know what you can expect in the upcoming weeks and even months of this show on Faith in Sport. Listen, before we bring Ed Billick on, if you have a question, if there's something that you want me to talk about, that you want me to address, and also, as I mentioned before, if there's somebody in your community that you think is a particularly good at the combination of faith and sport, they're a faithful individual, they have some experience and maybe currently or in the past of something with sport, and you feel they might be a good guest on the show. If you're listening right now, you probably listened in the past, and you probably get an idea of the type of guest that we're looking for and that we've generally had. You can do one of two things. You can tweet me at j.acquaviva1. That's j.acquaviva1. You're going to have to look up the spelling of Acquaviva. Or you can email me at faithandsport@wingate.edu. That's A-N-D in there, faithandsport@wingate.edu. Folks, welcome. For the people in Radio Maria land, you're listening to Faith in Sport, where we merge sport and virtue. Let's bring on our guest. Ed's on just about every week. I consider him a good friend, and he's great at this whole conversation of faith in sport. Ed Billick, welcome back to the show.
John Acquaviva, always a pleasure to be with you here, sir. And yeah, we've been doing this for a while with our Radio Maria friends, and howdy out there to all of you. Yeah, I'm from Texas A&M, where my son went there. Howdy.
That's right.
Hello out there, and welcome to the fall of 2023. I know it's getting a little frosty up north, so bring the plants in and throw an extra blanket on the bed.
Ed, you mentioned Texas, and of course, Radio Maria is in Louisiana, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ohio, Florida, Tennessee, as well as Texas. Do you know where Port Arthur is? That's where our affiliate is. Do you know where that is in relation to?
It's in East Texas. I think you go through there off of I-10. I may be wrong. The folks are going, no, we're nowhere near I-10. But yeah, we hear the traffic right from the house. Port Arthur, it's a lot of oil-rich area over there.
Is that right? Okay, there you go. Either way, a special shout out to the people in Texas and all over Radio Maria land. We are so thankful that you joined us today on Radio Maria. Folks, as you know, one of the things that Ed and I always do, especially in the beginning of our conversation, is we have what's called the hit or miss, something good, positive, something bad or negative in the world of sport. I always let Ed go first. There's no difference this time, brother. Do you have a hit or a miss in the world of sport, Ed?
Well, it's a hit, and it comes from an unusual place, a place that I really don't pay attention to. It comes from the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association.
Yes.
And the Las Vegas Aces have done it again. They're the back-to-back champions. They beat the New York Liberty. And one of their star team players is Kelsey Plum.
Okay.
The backcourt specialist.
Okay.
And after they won the championship, and I'll tell you how I found this, and I'm going to turn our listeners onto a website, but we'll talk that here at the end. In the podium, in ESPN's Holly Rowe, I think you guys know of Holly Rowe, she asked about repeating as a champion, and Plum immediately said, I want to thank God. This is not possible without him.
Very good.
And then and then a little bit later, she says, this is like heaven for me. It's so gratifying. Oh my gosh, God is so good to me and so good to our team. Mentioning God's nothing new for Kelsey Plum. She was the WNBA number one overall pick back in 2017, had an incredible college career. And she also shared earlier this year with GQ Sports, she wears a bracelet that has faith on it.
Yep.
And that she reads Jesus Calling. It's a 365-day devotional every morning. She goes, I start my day with it. Then I know you need to know what I can focus on. I just know that I am so much better of a human being when I'm grounded in something bigger than me. And she shouts out to our good Lord and thanking her for the skills she has as that team won the back-to-back WNBA championship. And John and listeners, you know, it's interesting. I always like scratch my head, and then finally the Holy Spirit tells me, okay, what's going to be my hit this week?
Yeah.
So there's this magazine online called Sports Spectrum. Sports Spectrum magazine for more stories where sports and faith intercede. There's a bunch of good, interesting sports figures that talk about their faith. So it's called Sports Spectrum magazine, and you can Google that. But anyhow, hats off and kudos to Kelsey Plum. I want to thank God, she said, this win was not possible without him.
I love it. Brother, how'd you come across this, just out of curiosity? Was it through Sports Spectrum magazine?
Exactly. That's where I saw it.
Interesting.
And I kind of Googled faith in sport this week, and a bunch of articles come up, you know. So and it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, so I could go back to my own personal experience. Every team I rooted for this weekend lost, except my Pittsburgh Steelers. So, you know, and then I finally said to myself, your disposition, is it? How you feel, how happy you are.
Disposition.
Cannot be about your sports teams winning and losing.
Yeah, exactly.
It should be about your faith in God. And they called me out of the bullpen Sunday. I went to 9:00 mass. I said, hey, if one of your lectors don't show up, I was with my grandson and son-in-law.
Did they go to the bullpen?
They called bullpen. Ed, we need you.
Ed Billick.
Right up there, did the second reading.
Very good.
There we go.
Ed, you should try to turn. I know you're a great reader. Everybody hears your voice here. You've been reading for a long time in church. I one time saw I attended a mass in which the priest sang the entire homily, and he did it by memory. I mean, the entire gospel, and he did it by memory. It was so impressive. I've never seen before or after a priest do that. And he did it. He didn't even look down at the book. I was so impressed by that. So anyway, I challenge you, Ed, the next time they call you from the bullpen is to sing the reading.
I wonder what feedback I would get. First of all, they go, boy, that guy's off key. They'd probably put me in choir practice for 3 years.
They would compare you to Taylor Swift, brother. I think they would compare. Ed, you know, I was actually thinking about making the miss of the week, this obsession, this time and effort that people are putting on Taylor Swift, because she just started, as you probably know, started dating one of the big stars of the NFL. He's the tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs named Travis Kelce. And it's amazing how much time, effort, just time that they spend mentioning her name, following her around. Where were they last seen? You know, having lunch. Like it's one of those situations where you just say, "Uncle, stop!" Like, it's about football, but that's not the society we live in. It's this.
It's all about hits. It's all about it's hyping up her career, hyping up Travis Kelce, hyping up the NFL. It's a show business. That's what they do.
I think, Travis Kelce, he's big anyway, right? He's a really good player. He backs up his, whatever he says and everything.
He had a great day yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Did he? Yeah.
12 catches. Yeah.
Oh, geez. That's a huge day. And I heard that the 24 hours after it was announced that they were dating, the sales of his jersey, which are already high, went up by 4 times in a 24-hour period. and it was projected that it was all Taylor Swift fans that did that. They're like, I don't even know what football is, and I don't really care about it, but now I care about it. I found that amazing. So that's my minor.
It's all that great marketing stuff. Okay, so what is your miss?
All right, let's just take a break here. Folks, you're listening to Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. That other voice you hear is Ed Billick. You're listening to Radio Maria. However, whenever, and wherever, however, and whenever you're joining us, I want to thank you, folks. So that's wonderful. Ed, are you laughing at me because I messed that thing up there?
You said it so many times.
I know. I did. I know. I didn't know what I was saying. Okay, so mine is it's a hit as well, and mine has to do with Floyd Mayweather. Now, you remember this guy, right? He was considered one of the most successful, clearly, one of the most successful boxers of all time. In fact, I am pretty sure that this is true, because I know right up until the time that he retired a couple years ago, he was the highest paid boxer in the history of the sport. It was really impressive and amazing how much money he made per year boxing. And he was terrific. A lot of people kind of, they critiqued his boxing because he rarely, if ever, knocked anybody out, but he would just win by points. But of course, that's what boxing is. Anyway, that my hit is about what he has done off the field. And in particular, everybody is familiar with what happened with Hamas and Israel. And what he did, he delivered supplies to the Israeli Defense Forces and to civilians to aid the Jewish state as war with Hamas terrorists escalates in the Middle East. He, using his own private plane, Floyd Mayweather Jr., carried 5,000 pounds of relief items, including water, food, and bulletproof vests. So that's the difference, right? Some of them are for the civilians, other for the fighting forces. And the donations were delivered by his personal pilots, which includes a stable of retired U.S. Army and Air Force veterans. Ed, you and I have talked on this show a few times about that making a lot of money, making tens of millions of dollars. Sometimes that's in their annual contract. And he has made hundreds of millions, literally, in his career. In fact, one of his last years, I read that he made $50 million in 1 year. That's almost double of the highest paid athletes we have, right? And one of the things you and I talked about is it a sin to make that much money? And I don't think anybody would say it is. And certainly we're not in a position of judgment. That is clearly something that God would make a comment on. And that's on, I think, that's an issue to have a discussion with God on in your heart and literally at the gates of heaven and however that works. But one of the things that we've talked about on the show, Ed, is it may be a sin if that money is not spent, at least some of it, for good use. And this is a really good example. I have no idea what his faith is. I have no idea how much money he's given to charities over the years, but this obviously hit home with him and he was moved by that whole situation. And he said, hey, let me help. And he didn't ask for anybody else's money. In fact, he used his own airplane to deliver those supplies. That's my hit of the week. I thought it was awesome and good for you, Floyd Mayweather Jr.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. And, the other thing that's a religious war they're fighting again.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to call it that because we can infuriate both sides, but it is a religious war. It's a civilization and those that love and against barbarism, those who hate. And it's just as clear as day. So say your prayers there, Dr. Acquaviva, for those people.
No, I agree. In fact, just last night, and this is going to be encouragement to you and to our listeners, our Radio Maria listeners, that include this in your daily prayer. One of the things that we have been really good as a family is just before the kids go to bed, we all kneel in front of the crucifix, and then either I or my wife Alicia leads us in a brief prayer. We usually end, in fact, we always end with at least one Hail Mary, sometimes a decade of the Rosary. And last night, I recalled that we should be praying for that war in particular. And I think it is a unjust, thing that Hamas has done. And it's amazing we're having these conversations, and in particular in some city streets and on college campuses, that there's an argument of whether this was a wrong thing or not for them to send bombs into Israel. This is not a political show. This is not a news show in that sense. So I'm not going to go too much into that. But either way, it deserves our prayers, and we need to lift up those prayers to God, because the reason we pray is because we believe God hears those prayers. How he acts on them, we don't know, but we need to lift up those prayers. And so I encourage you listeners to do just that. We need peace in the Middle East, and there's been more conflict in that area than any other part of the world in the last several decades. And so please pray for that. Yes. Yeah. You could even say that, minus the world wars we've been in, right? Hey, here's something else, brother. Let's shift gears. So there it is, folks. Our Ed and I's hit and miss for the week. Folks, you're listening to Faith in Sport. This is where we look at sport through a Catholic lens. This is for anybody involved in sport. So whether you watch sport, play sport, you're a fan, you're an administrator, referee, this show is for you. Either way, we're just thankful that you've joined us today here on Radio Maria. So Ed, one of the neat things about this show is that it is always up to date, right? It's time sensitive to a degree. And one of the things I've mentioned, I think on air, maybe even with you recently, is come Thursday or Friday, there's been numerous weeks, right? We do the show in the beginning of the week, midweek. And over the weekend, I'm sometimes like not only looking for a story to talk about and our hit and miss and other stuff to talk about, but I start thinking about what's like the big story. And one of the things I've done is I prayed on it. I said, God, send me some, kind of like you found through that Sports Spectrum magazine. That was a really good story, right? And it was a really good way to tie in these two things we love, faith and sport. And something always comes to me, something through the radio, through TV, somebody mentions it to me, somebody emails me, and I go, that's one of my topics. And sometimes it turns into my hit or miss. So on the way to work today, I like to listen to news radio on the way into work. And for some reason, I think everybody has like these patterns, whatever. I listen to news radio on the way in, and on the way back, I usually listen to music or sports radio, right? And I was listening I changed it to sports radio this morning, which I don't often do. And they just asked this great question. As soon as I turned on, they were asking the question about Caleb Williams, the Heisman winning quarterback for Southern Cal, and whether he should continue, even though he's healthy, playing the rest of the year. Now, Ed, this is unbelievable, unfathomable to me that they would even bring this up. But this is the culture in which we live. So let me set this up, Ed. He won the Heisman Trophy last year. He's a terrific quarterback. You've seen him play probably, even if you just watch 3 minutes of highlights, you're like, this guy is incredibly talented. He's projected to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft after the season, sometime in the spring. And the question from the ESPN commentator host was to his former NFL playing radio partner and to the listening audience. And it simply was, they lost their second game of the year. And Ed, as you know, no 2-loss team has ever made the playoff. The 14th
That's
playoff.
right. Mm-hmm.
And he's won the Heisman, and probably he's out of the Heisman. He had just a couple weeks ago 3 picks in the first half. You can't do that and win the Heisman. That you generally don't win unless the rest of your year is just lights out. And they're asking Ed whether he should just hang it up, like just quit playing for USC. And I found this incredible that he would even ask the question. Thankfully, Ed, his in-studio co-host like almost barked at him and just goes, no, you keep playing. You made a commitment to the team. And of course, he said what you and I say on this program all the time. But I was somewhat, in fairness, this is part of ESPN. This is part of sports radio. You sometimes just throw stuff out there to have a discussion, right? He wasn't necessarily a proponent of it, but there's people who think that, Ed, and I'll bet there's people maybe even closely related to Caleb Williams that just goes, you have nothing to gain. But that's not true. You want to gain the full respect of your teammates. And if he quits now with 4 or 5 games left and just says, well, I can't win the Heisman, nor can we go to, just think about if every athlete, Ed, hung up their spikes or their shoes or put up their tennis racket just because they couldn't win a championship. We would have no opponents. There would be no opponents. No, I mean that, right?
That's that selfishness that is out there. And yeah, I mean, he's there playing for the school, and it's all for the school, rah, rah, rah. That's where it all should lie. I thought you were then move on to James Harden. That guy can't keep a team.
No, he can't.
Well, he show up for the first game this season with the Sixers because I don't know why he wants to go play with his buddies down in Los Angeles. How many teams has this guy played? The selfish people out there, and they get no respect. So Caleb Williams has a decision to make. If it is he going to be a great athlete and a great guy, or is he going to be one of these selfish guys that it's all about me?
No, I know. In fact, I mean this with all sincerity. I think I've even said it on these airwaves before. I don't know what type of person I would be, how different I would be, if any, if I was granted that skill to be the top of one of the sports in our culture.
Oh, like rugby.
Yeah, but even so,
in this culture, because you were a collegiate rugby player.
I was, yeah, and I actually played for a couple of decades after that. But Yeah, like how would I be? And sometimes I'm slow to judge that because I think you can get swallowed up, especially in this day. You can get swallowed up by your fame, your fortune, and you start reading about yourself and how good you are, and you start reading about how much money you can make or have made, and it would just be it would be really difficult to get grounded. And that's why that hit you had with that WNBA player. She's like, I would not be here unless God granted me these tools to play professional basketball, to make a living out of doing something I love. And I'm paraphrasing her. In fact, she probably didn't even say that last part. But yeah, I sometimes wonder, like, what would I have been like? And so I'm slow to judge. But that's the one thing this is opposite of that, or this is different than that, I should say. To wonder aloud whether you should complete the season just because you can't win the Heisman or the national championship. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous notion. It's a ridiculous thought. And it's embarrassing for the people who actually do that. And we know that we've talked about this, Ed, right? People that sit out in bowl games. And I'm like, that's your team. That's a bowl game. Play in the bowl game.
And then you and I are like this, and so many of our listeners are. You do things in life to your best ability. You give the most to others that then gives to yourself. And guess who takes care of you going forward? The good Lord's always going to be there for you.
Yeah.
I can see Caleb Williams sitting out the rest of the season, becomes a rookie quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, number one pick again. No, they don't have it. Point being is then he gets injured and has a career-ending knee injury or something. You never know. So
yeah.
Have what you have today, take it, embellish it, enjoy it, and help others along the way, and the good Lord will take care of you.
No, Ed, I think I really believe that part of the reason so many athletes are so thankful, right? The ones that are genuinely thankful, they have a huge heart of gratitude for being a professional athlete, is because of the joy that they probably get when they give to others that are in sometimes in actual desperate need. What a feeling that may be. I give. I know you guys give. I think virtually every Christian, certainly Catholics, it's talked about in Mass, like the tithing and so forth. But to really give large amounts of money away to see the impact, right, that it can be made in our culture, I think must be really powerful. And I think that magnifies the gratitude that people have.
Don't worry, John. He'll play the rest of the season. They were just looking for people like you and I to talk about that.
That's right. Very good. Folks, I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. That other voice you hear is our special guest virtually each and every week, Ed Billick. This is Faith in Sport here on Radio Maria. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to do this right, wherever, whenever, and however you're joining us.
Yeah, sweet.
Okay, brother, I'm going to do an update on something that occurred a couple weeks ago. And in fact, I mentioned, the listeners may remember this. I used to teach at Roanoke College. I currently teach at Wingate University. Roanoke College is in Virginia. It's a small Division III university. In fact, at the time, they did not have men's or women's swim team, but they made national news. In fact, international news a couple weeks ago, because the women's swim team was protesting that a male was now on their squad. He had swam for the men the previous year at Roanoke College, and then he switched over and just followed the NCAA guidelines of 1 year of hormonal therapy, is what they call it. But they were greatly insulted by this. They were all frustrated by this. They thought it was an injustice, and they fully seem to get what this means to women's sports, not just women's swimming at Roanoke College, but women's sports in general. And there's two comments I want to make. One is that the story is not over. Ed, they had a press conference in which they and their parents stood up, and virtually every swimmer and every parent of a swimmer said something on why they were protesting this. They all sang the same song for the most part, and they were just talking about, this is an injustice. This is something that should be banned. And of course, this show, I'm hoping, folks, you know that I have made this a regular point of conversation. There are many states that have banned this, from youth sports all the way through college, that you cannot, as a biological male, compete against women. It's going on in about 20 states now. With a few others, it's pending a bill in their local legislature. But also internationally, there's been the track and field administration or federation, cycling federation, rugby, and so forth have all banned biological women competing or biological men competing against women. But this story's not over in Roanoke because of the they have retained a lawyer, and let me go to let's see.
Who has retained a lawyer? The school?
Yeah, the women's college team. But this is different. The Roanoke College has not said anything. They just said we are going to just follow what the NCAA says. And what Roanoke College swim team did, they retained a lawyer, and the lawyer said, we want to defend these girls. They need defense on this. This is an unfair situation, and we are going to represent them in the court of law to see that their wishes are upheld. And I thought that was a great thing. I thought that was good news. I just read this the other day, and I think that is something that's important that more attorneys do.
It's a safety. It's a whole safety thing, in a competition from other teams. So why would you even want to compete against a team with a male on it? I don't care what you call them.
Yeah.
How many females go and play on males teams?
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons. Yeah.
Because it's the bodily structure, and it's the muscle tone and all that makes it very dangerous, if you will, to compete against. Now, swimming, I don't know, you're not into something like volleyball, but nevertheless, it's not fair to take a spot where other females could have that opportunity. So, it's just crazy.
Yeah. So this is a follow-up to that, because one of the things I've reported also on this show is that, interestingly, Ed, that Martina Navratilova, although she is a well-known supporter of the LGBTQ community, she's a former multiple Grand Slam champ in the 70s
Absolutely.
and the 80s, and I think even into the 90s. And she came out as lesbian decades ago, but she has been very outspoken on this issue of transgender athletes. So let me read directly and partly paraphrase this story that came out recently, and it directly relates to this whole story about the swim team at Roanoke College. Navratilova has continued to voice her opposition to the inclusion of transgender athletes in women's categories in different sports, and this time called out Gymnastics Australia. The Czech-American tennis legend slammed Australia's top gymnastics organization for changing rules to allow transgender and gender-diverse people to compete in all community gymnastics events. Moreover, the guidelines affirm that athletes can participate in whichever category best reflects their gender identity, meaning transgender athletes will be allowed to compete against biological females in women's categories. She ended up saying in her comment, she said, to say this won't end well is an understatement. To say Gymnastics Australia just threw females and girls under the bus is an understatement. It is an understatement. What is wrong with you guys? This inclusion actually will exclude biological women and most of all girls. I think she is a great spokesperson for this. I think it's fantastic. In fact, she has a rare standpoint, Ed. She is clearly a proponent of the LGBTQ community to have equality in all matters in culture, but not in this. She fully realizes as a former athlete that there is a major difference, not a partial difference. There's a major difference between biological men and biological women. And I hope she never stops this. She's 66 years old. I hope she makes it into her 90s, because I'll bet $100 that even 10, 20 years from now, if somebody puts a microphone in front of her, she's going to be claiming the same thing. And that's exactly what has to happen. Men arguing this doesn't get to as many ears as women arguing this. And even further, a lesbian woman, that's how this fight's going to be won. Your comment.
No, just that's perfectly said for all the right reasons. That group of diverse folks, God bless them all, they lump like everybody into one box, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I want to go through the whole makeup of that, but yeah, that flies in the face of feminism. It flies in the face of a lot of things that good human beings, especially in sports, appreciate. And so Martina's right on with her comments there. So, no,
Yeah, good
more
for
people
her.
need to speak up like her.
I agree. And I know she will keep doing that. Brother, one more thing before you go. You probably saw this because this was a player back in the day when you and I probably first started to become fans of football. In the 1970s, do you remember Walt Garrison? He was a running back for the Dallas Cowboys. You remember that name?
Dallas Cowgirls?
Yeah.
No, that's
Ed,
before Jerry Jones owned them. That's good. Yeah, that was the Cowboys. Yeah.
Okay, that was the Cowboys. Got it.
Yeah,
But
I'm
do you
sorry.
remember
Okay.
the name Walt Garrison?
Absolutely.
Okay, so he died last week, right?
He did.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, that's right. I heard he passed too. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. He passed away, and I think it was about a week ago. But the most interesting thing, Ed, about him was that he, in the off season, was a bull rider in rodeos. He participated in rodeos, and not only was he a good cowboy, right? Because I saw him in a lot of different ads, and every time his picture was taken, he seemed to have a cowboy hat. And so he was a true Dallas Cowboy.
Was he a cowboy back in the day, or is he still riding bulls like last year?
Well, I don't think he was. He was an old guy, but come last year. But that's what he did to make, and the obituary mentioned to make extra money. Now think about that, right? How almost comical that is. Some of these guys make 10 million, 20 million, literally $30 million a year. Nobody has to ride any bulls at a rodeo. Is that crazy?
We personally know Joe DeLamalure who had a problem getting health insurance. Remember the guys back in the day, we were growing up. It's not the same NFL as it is today.
No, it's not, brother. I thought that was such an interesting story, and it really shows in our lifetime just how much, if nothing else, the finances have changed. And here's a guy just 40 years ago had to ride bulls to make extra money in the off season of a major sport.
Well, too, John, I'm sure he didn't do it just for the money. He probably did it for the camaraderie, and he likes getting roughed up once in a while and getting thrown around. So,
No, they didn't offer the whole story, and they didn't actually interview him on
that. We're making stuff up here.
Yeah, but it is possible. He probably enjoyed the heck out of it. In fact, the reason that people right now listening to this program might actually know him is because he was a spokesman for chewing tobacco on TV. And so, right, and he always used to wear his cowboy hat, and he goes, "I'm Walt Garrison, just a pinch," right? That's all you need.
Between cheek and gum.
Yeah, that's right. Brother, listen, our time, this segment has come to a close. I can't thank you enough. I love the fact that you're a regular guest here on Radio Maria. You're fantastic to talk to rebound stuff off of, and you just bring a great perspective. I appreciate it.
Well, I asked John one thing is our listeners reach out to you, and you can tell them in the next segment how to do that. We want to hear from you. We want to put in some plugs in your local community. If you have a men's or women's retreat coming up, or you got some big Catholic event happening, pierogies, they're making a pierogi contest or a bingo or something that a lot of you folks do, let us know. We'll throw it out there. It'll cause other people to do the same.
I appreciate that. Brother, you have a good day. We'll talk soon. Thanks again.
See ya. Bye-bye.
All right, folks, that was Ed Billick. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. There's more to come here on Faith in Sport. Hang with us because this is just a great opportunity for me. It's a great opportunity for you to see the connection between our wonderful Catholic faith and the world of sport that is constantly around us. You're listening to Radio Maria, Faith in Sport. We'll be right back after this break. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. You're listening to Radio Maria. Here's what we're going to do the second half of this show. We have our weekend headlines. We're going to do the quick Q&A with Dr. A question that was sent in from one of our listeners. And I'm going to mention to you why to stay tuned to this show and to stay tuned to Radio Maria. I'm going to talk about a couple of our upcoming guests. We have some really special people coming up on this show. Either way, thank you wherever, whenever, and however you're listening to Faith in Sport. And please support Radio Maria. This is listener supported. Please help them out, especially when they have their drives, which they just had one. But you can call anytime to make a pledge to Radio Maria. So please do that. So before we get into weekend headlines, when Ed Billick was on just a few minutes ago, one of the things he mentioned was he just really encouraged the listeners to contact me, reach out if you have a topic that you want to see addressed, what you feel, what you would like to hear on is Ed and I's opinion, both of our opinions, one of ours opinion on some of the topics going on in the world of sport, especially if it has to do with ethics and morality and character. But also, if there's somebody in your community or somebody that you know that would be a guest that would kind of fit the kind of the standards or what we're looking for in a guest, somebody that is a faithful individual but yet is involved in sport and may have an interesting story to tell. Either way, you can contact me one of two ways. Twitter, you can tweet me at j.aquaviva1. So it's j.aquaviva1, or you can email me at faithandsport@wingate.edu. Remember, the and is and part. So faithandsport@wingate.edu. Please email, folks. Again, you're listening to Faith in Sport, where we apply our faith to all aspects of sport. So let's get you up to date, folks, on what's going on in the world of sport. Then we'll follow that up with a quick Q&A with Dr. A. Okay, so in Major League Baseball, well, we're deep into the playoffs for sure. The Phillies that are battling the Arizona Diamondbacks, they play to see who goes to the World Series. So their series is tied at 3-3, and they're battling to see who goes to the big competition, which is the World Series in the game of baseball. Actually, the Phillies are up 3-2. I said it was 3-3. In the American League, it is a 3-3 tie between the Houston Astros and the Texas Rangers. So everybody in Texas is going crazy over one team or the other. Those two play tonight to see who advances to the World Series to play the Diamondbacks Phillies winner. That's Major League Baseball. College football, several big games this past weekend. Top 25 games included Alabama beating Tennessee, Florida State pulling away from Duke late, and Utah beating previous unbeaten, one-loss team, Southern Cal. And there was also some other games that were really big. And of course, the biggest one in my heart was University of Michigan beat state rival Michigan State 49-0. Current top five are now University of Georgia, University of Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, and the University of Washington. By the way, keep watching, because my guess is of those five teams, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, and Washington, at least four of those five teams will have one loss before they head into the final week of the season. Just my prediction there. In the NHL, the season is underway, and the Boston Bruins, the Colorado Avalanche, and the Vegas Golden Knights are the only teams yet to lose. Each of them is either 5-0 or 6-0. But right behind them, folks, off to a good start are the Detroit Red Wings at 5-1. So there you have it, sports news that may or may not change your life. Folks, you're listening to Radio Maria. This is Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Thank you for joining us today. There was a question that came my way, which I thought was excellent. It's just one of those questions that kind of encompasses our involvement in sport. And every parent out there, even if it's been a while since you were, let's say your kids in their 20s or 30s, it's been a while since they played elementary school or even high school sports. This is something that's going to hit home and something that's probably going to talk to your heart and mind, at least to a certain extent. If you have a grandparent, or if you are a grandparent, you have a grandson or granddaughter that's playing sport, and certainly if you are a parent, everybody knows how that tugs on our hearts when our kids compete, and there's a certain part of us that comes out, and sometimes that is not so good, that part that comes out. So this can help put it, at least one aspect of sport, in perspective. The question is, as a player, is it a good idea to question the coach on selecting starting lineups and game strategy? Now, I'm going to extend this. The question was as a player, but I'm going to extend this to parents as well, and anybody involved in sport. That's your niece or nephew out there, your godson or goddaughter out there. Is it a good idea to question the coach on selecting starting lineups and game strategy? In other words, in-game decisions that they make. So let's talk about this. Simply put, it's generally a really bad idea to outwardly question any decision of the coach at any level of sport for any reason. Is it easy to question them? Are their decisions downright maddening at times? Yes, in both cases. I'm with you on that one. However, right or wrong, we need to let everyone do their job, and the coaches deserve respect in this process. We won't always agree or understand a coach's decision, but they are in that position for a reason. And it's best to assume they're making moves to put their team in the best position to win. we must assume that first, that they're just trying to win and they would like to win as much as you. It's rare to find anything else. They're not in that position because they like losing. They're not in that position because they don't care. In fact, they're in that position because they do care. But even in youth sports where the coaches are almost all volunteers, the time and effort they put into that team on and off the field gives them, for lack of a better word, permission to make those on-field decisions, and those decisions on, for instance, the starting lineup, which they sometimes make the night before, the morning of, sometimes even a week before. Let them make those decisions. And interestingly, let me quote from our Catholic Catechism. This is number 1898, by the way. Every human community needs an authority to govern it. The foundation of such authority lies in human nature. It is necessary for the unity of the state. Its role is to ensure, as far as possible, the common good of society. Now, you may think that doesn't directly apply to this question of, is it a good idea to question the coach? I would argue different. Every human community needs an authority to govern it. And when they say community, they're not talking about the little suburb you live in. They're not talking about the big city you live in. They're not talking about the municipality that you belong to. Every human community. Sports is a community. That team is a community. This, of course, does not mean as a parent or a fan of the game that you turn a blind eye to wrongdoing. If someone's well-being is in danger, we should be compelled to act no matter the nature of the authority figure. If they're a former professional athlete and they're worth millions of dollars, if they're a big name, they're a big politician. If someone's well-being spiritually, physically, or emotionally is in danger and it's a really negative situation, something should be said, something should be done. But as far as game-related matters, let the coach make those decisions. If you think you can do better, feel free to throw your head into the ring the very next season. And I'll say this, because youth sports needs all the good people it can get. If you think you can do a good job, and it's not even a comparison thing. So it's easier for me to say if you think you could do a better job. That's not what this is about. If you think you can do a good job, by all means, volunteer. And remember, one of the reasons that they deserve a great deal of respect, it's difficult for a lot of people to say yes to that. And sometimes they're compelled to do it because nobody else will stand up. Please be easy on them and understand your role as a fan, as a parent, and let them do their role as the coach. If you think you can do better, zip your lip and take their job the next year when it comes open. So there you go, folks. Is it a good idea to question the coach on selecting starting lineups and game strategy? By the way, this is something I address in my forthcoming book. It's called Improving Your Sportsmanship Through Catholic Teaching and Common Sense. It's going to be coming out after the first of the year, so you can look for that. Folks, we only have a few minutes left, but there's a couple things I want to mention. And one is who you can look forward to on this show in the upcoming weeks. And one of the things that Ed always says, like, for instance, I was with Ed recently, and one of the things he mentioned was when I met somebody that was asking us about this show, Ed was so proud of the fact that we talk about all these meaningful things. Yeah, sometimes it has nothing to do with anything in the world of sport. We're just talking X's and O's and strategy and hurting as a fan and so forth. But one of the things that Ed mentioned to this individual that we were talking to was he just turned to me and he goes, John, just tell him all the great guests that you've had on. And I have a feeling if you're a regular listener of the show, you may not be able to recall people by name, but it's just we've been blessed so much with people that have great experiences in sport and are very faithful people. These are daily communicants in some instances, but either way, they're faithful to the teachings. They are lifelong Catholics. Sometimes they're converts, but either way, they're telling it from their personal experience and sometimes through the lens of the sport that they played or are currently playing. Let me give you an idea of who is going to be on the show in the upcoming weeks. Next time we have the show, Joe Condit is going to join us. He is the president of Catholic Speakers. It's a Catholic Speakers Bureau. It's virtually the only one. If you want a speaker to come to your men's or women's conference, you guys have a retreat, this is the place to go. Just go to CatholicSpeakers.com. The president and founder of Catholic Speakers, Joe Condit, he's been on this show before. This guy loves the faith, and the reason he does this is he wants these people, he wants his speakers to speak truthfully and speak boldly about our faith, and he articulates that real well. He'll be on in a couple weeks. After that, we're going to have Deacon Dan Bornay. He's been on before. This guy is a character, and this guy has something to say because of this. He's a deacon in the Diocese of Baton Rouge in Louisiana, but he's also, in fact, this is how I got in touch with him, he's the public address announcer for LSU football and basketball. So when somebody says something like, ladies and gentlemen, the Honda Civic in the parking lot has their lights on, that is Dan Bornay. If you go to an LSU football or basketball game, obviously he does more than that, but that's the simple kind of humorous note that he would pass along. And then I have another deacon on. This has taken us into well into the winter, or certainly late into the fall. His name is Deacon Bob Pierce. He's from the Diocese of Charleston here in South Carolina, and he is the organizer of the local chapter of Runners for Life. And it's just what it says. These are people who raise funds through regular runs, like as in running down the street. And he is going to tell us what impact they have and why they run, and how they give back to this pro-life community that they're trying to build in the Diocese of Charleston. It's just through exercise. It's through this ministry that he is trying to raise awareness about this pro-life cause. So there you go. Joe Condit, Deacon Dan Bornay, and Deacon Bob Pierce are three of my next guests on this show. Let's see. There's one other point I want to make, and this is very light. But it has to do with an athlete I think just about everybody knows, and that is Tom Brady, the former quarterback, played for 20 years in the NFL, outstanding. I don't think there's much question about the fact that he's considered the greatest of all time, but let's make that argument for another time. But I thought it was interesting that he made a public statement. I think it was through social media. And he said for the first time, he's actually watching football. Of course, on Sunday, he was always a player and getting ready for the game. So he watched very little live games. But one of the things he said is he's finally noticing what everybody has been complaining about for years, and that the referees make some awful calls despite having the opportunity to watch and rewatch some of those plays on review or rewind. And I thought it was funny because he probably always shrugged his shoulders and says, well, it can't be too wrong, but it's amazing how much they get that wrong. And actually, this isn't a criticism. I think I'm a little critical of them outside of this program, and on a few times have criticized them on the program, but more so it's just to make fun of them that despite having all this technology, they still can't get sometimes whether a guy was in bounds or out of bounds, whether he made the catch or not made the catch, whether he was safe at second base or not. It's just amazing sometimes how obvious it is. But I thought it was funny that he finally gets that referees make really bad calls that can change the outcome of a game. All right. As always, I like to end with a quote from a pope or one of our saints about sport, and then we'll sign off. This is from St. John Paul II, who said, when sports are played and understood in the right way, they're extraordinary expressions of a person's best inner energies and of his ability to overcome the difficulties of competition. Amen, St. John Paul II. Okay, before we go, let's give a special thank you to Ed Billick, who joins us in the first half of this program. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Please join us next time here on Radio Maria for more Faith in Sport. St. Sebastian, pray for us.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.